Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry? Too many Lib Dems? You can never have too many Lib Dems. Well, now that we've found out that Councillor Stubbs cannot count, I shall start the afternoon.
Someone's bringing a spare. Right, so the projector's not working. A spare's coming over.
Well,
So we'll have to wait till the spare arrives before we do a presentation.
yes, okay, but we can get the other stuff through.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members and officers. Welcome to the Planning Committee. In the interest of safety, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwell. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust Fire Marshal's regulations, please remember to sign out when you are leaving the building after today's meeting. For those of you who have not attended this committee before, I will explain the running order for this afternoon. After committee members have declared their interests and agreed the minutes of the previous meeting, I will announce each item and ask those of you who are here to make a deputation to come and sit at the table. After the planning officer has made the presentation for the application, individual deputies will have 6 minutes to express their views, and joint deputies will have 12 minutes between them to make their views known. After which you will take no further part in the proceedings unless we need to ask a question to clarify a statement that has been made. Members will then ask questions, make comments, and they make the decision on the application. Both members of the committee and members of the public are reminded of the need to consider material planning matters and not to refer to any personal information about other members of the public. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed, that is filmed, from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and the recording will be on the Council's website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of those making deputations, but there will be some footage of those making deputations as they approach and leave the table, where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room whilst the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Finally, may I ask everyone to use the microphones provided when they are speaking. There is an additional announcement which there may well be a gap at the beginning of this meeting. The projector we have is not working particularly well, and we have sent out for a replacement. I think the best thing to do at this stage is to go around the table so that everyone who is in front of you can introduce themselves. I'm Hugh Mason, I'm a councillor for St Jude Ward, and I am the chairman of this meeting.
I'm Kieran Laven, I'm the planning solicitor.
Lisa Gallagher from Democratic Services.
Judith Smythe, councillor for St Jude Ward and vice chairman of the planning committee.
Gerald Vernon Jackson, one of the councillors from Milton Ward.
Tom Wood, councillor for St Thomas Ward.
Claire Udy, councillor for Charles Dickens.
Luke Stubbs, councillor in Eastern Caryswater.
Donna Jones, Conservative Group Leader and councillor for Hilsey Ward.
Councillor Jo Hooper and I represent Paulsgrove. Councillor Rob Wood. I'm standing in for Councillor Steve Pitt, and Chair, I will have to leave on the second item because I have to be away by the end of the day before the meeting ends, just to let you know.
Richard Lee, Portsmouth City Council Regulatory Services Officer.
Alan Banting, Portsmouth City Council Planning Officer.
Stephen Flynn, PCC Highways Officer.
Claire Upton-Brown, Head of Planning.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies from members? Any apologies to record? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Apologies from Councillor Ken Alcombe, and Councillor Hooper is here, deputising for him.
Thank you.
I know I'm deputising for somebody, but I'm not sure who we... yes, I'm Susie Horton today.
Well, welcome.
Sorry, Chair. We've also got apologies from Councillor Pitt and Councillor Susie Horton.
Right.
Oh, and Councillor Stagg.
Right. Thank you very much for the apologies and statement of who is deputising. Do members have any interests in any of these matters? Councillor Stubbs, if you please.
In respect of planning application number 1 at Moneyfields, while I did go to visit the site about a bit more than a year ago and did make a blog post on it. It did not come to a conclusion. I've checked with a solicitor and it is not an interest. But I just want to state that before the meeting.
Chair, I don't think this is an interest for which will mean I have to leave the meeting, but I am an allotment holder on plot 278 at Moneyfields, which is pretty near to the site.
You have the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 19th of August. Can I take them, first of all, for accuracy? Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and page 11, page 12. Right, thank you. Can I have somebody propose that they are a correct record? Thank you, Councillor Jones. And seconded? Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. Sign those as a correct record. There you go. And now, of course, the Assistant Director of City Development to speak on any updates.
Chair, I have no updates for this afternoon's meeting.
Were there any matters arising from the previous minutes which people wish to raise? No, thank you. We then come to the planning applications. The first planning application is Moneyfield Sports and Social Club, Moneyfield Avenue, and I have Pat Brooks, Mr. Robb, Mr. Matthew Pickup, Kat Close, Pete Seiden and Councillor Darren Sanders as deputies. I should be grateful if they would come to the table, please. Be okay for is there enough now? Just about. We believe that there is just about enough light coming out of the projector that we can see. And so could I ask the officer to make the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application site is broadly rectangular and level, covers 2.9 hectares, currently sort of grass pitches. The grass pitch here, the main pitch, is unaffected by the proposals, and you'll see how the rest of the site is affected by the proposed development. So yeah, that is an existing grass floodlit pitch. I've annotated this image. So the site is bounded by the railway line on the west side and the rear of properties in Highgate Road. So the main pitch unaffected by the development, the other parts of the site that are affected by the development. To the north, you've got allotment gardens. To the east, you have properties and rear gardens in Salcombe Avenue. Then at the southern end of the site, there is a boxing club, a training floodlit pitch, the site access here, changing facilities, you've got a stand, clubhouse, and then the sort of sides of properties here, Dover Road and Martin Road. I include these images to show the buildings that you've got on Moneyfield Avenue from the rear up here, and an image from the east side, picking out the fact that you've got a hedgerow trees run through the centre of the site currently, and there is some other planting, including these Lombardy poplars on the edge of the railway line. The other sort of key piece of information that I'm hoping will be shown on the site layout, there is a sort of a major storm drain that runs north-south through the site beyond Dover Road, which is a constraint to development. So, there's two key parts to the proposal. There is the replacement sports and social club in the centre of the site. It's single-storey on the southern end and two-storey on the northern side. There is a artificial floodlit pitch proposed north of the replacement sports and social club. And the other sort of key component to the site is at the southern end, which is a three-storey block of 14 flats here and 6 pairs of semis here. There's two access to the site, this one to serve the sports and social club, and this one to serve the residential. Some 3D visuals of the proposed clubhouse and pitch. The first one here, obviously, is the southern side, the proposed stands. This is the single-storey element of the building, and then obviously on the northern side is the two-storey element that you can see in this image here. This one is the view effectively from the railway line and from residents in Highgate Road, and this one is the proposals at the western side for the entrances to the proposed building. So the proposals in elevation, this is the southern elevation facing onto the existing and main grass floodlit pitch unaltered by the proposal. This is the west side where the entrances are. This is the east side. It will be viewed from the railway line, and then the northern side facing onto the new artificial pitch. In terms of the site layout, you have the entrances in here. One sort of changing rooms, stands, gym, boxing gym on the southern side of the building, and then the entrance in here to the function hall facilities on the ground floor, and the social club, bar, kitchen, staff areas including a terrace at first floor level on the first floor element of the building. Some visuals of the houses and flats. So obviously this would be the replacement streetscape for the sort of clubhouse, the changing rooms and car park, training pitch that you've currently got on the site. This would be the site entrance at the western end of the terrace of the semi-detached houses here and the proposed flats. This is the proposed flats facing onto the houses, and this is an image of the flats facing toward the railway line.
Chair, can I just ask, so I'm totally clear, because obviously I'm subbing in here. On the map on the bottom, can you be very clear where those bits are going, so I'm totally clear what you're replacing?
Absolutely, right. So this image 5 is taken down in this corner, showing the 6 pairs of semis. This image here is that viewpoint marked 6. This one is the viewpoint down Dover Road marked 7. And the final image there is the one marked 8 from the railway line.
Sorry, and just to clarify, that map on the bottom, is that a before or after?
It's the after. It's the proposed houses and flats at the southern end of the site. So elevations of the 3-storey block of flats, so facing onto the houses, facing onto the railway line. This is the layout of the 3-storey building. 14 flats, 1 and 2 bed. The smallest unit is 2 here. The largest units are these at the sort of southern end, 9 and 14. These are the proposed houses. A key aspect of part of the amendments secured as part of this application is to do with the quality of materials. The proposal is for a natural slate roof for these small dormers to be clad in lead, and obviously a quality red facing brick. And that material is used throughout the development on the flats, and brick and natural slate on the proposed garages, which is in this image here. And this shows that the layout of the 2.5-storey 4-bedroom semis. Sorry, please bear with me. Right, the application has been advertised as a departure, and I've included this extract from the proposal map. You will see the application site here. Most of the site is protected open space. There are some figures here which, and this is a comparison of existing and proposed. So around a quarter of the protected open space would be built on by this proposal. So relevant local plan policy, PCS 13, in short, harm from building on protected open space will be unacceptable unless wider public benefits outweigh the loss. That is something that I'll be coming back to in my presentation. But ultimately, the applicants have, there are a range of supporting documents for this application, including a sporting needs assessment and protected open space statement and an addendum to that. And ultimately, these bullet points here are the applicant's summary of the wider public benefits to the proposal. I don't intend to read them out. They are listed also in your report on page 30. The applicants provided this phase-in drawing to show their intentions for developing the apartments first on this part of the site, then some demolition of part of the clubhouse here in order to gain access to the rear of the site, and for the houses, the replacement clubhouse and the sports pitch to be that sort of second phase of development, with a sort of programme sort of described here as the apartments in the first 6 months, and then the remainder of the development over the next 12 months. I've included this image and an extract from another local plan policy, PCS 19, because normally applicants will be expected to provide 30% affordable housing on site, or 43% if there is an argument around off-site provision. But this particular development, I mean, ordinarily we wouldn't be presented with a proposal for housing on protected open space. But the housing is part of enabling development to for Moneyfields to provide a replacement sports and social club. And I've included this sort of summary here from their enabling development statement that reads, the scheme would be financially unviable and not deliverable if the local plan authority insists that a financial contribution toward affordable housing is necessary. If agreement on this point cannot be reached, the club will no longer be either financially or operationally viable and will close. The club is happy to enter into a Section 106 planning obligation with the City Council to ensure that the development is phased in such a manner that the club facilities are constructed at the same time as the semi-detached houses. Additionally, to allay any fears with regard to the possibility that only the residential element would be built and not the club facilities, it is proposed that the Section 106 would include caveats requiring delivery of 30% on-site affordable housing or the requisite contribution for off-site affordable housing. This is the last image that I'll be showing today. I've included this one. Obviously, I've turned the site through 90 degrees, so north is at the top end here. But I've included some measurements in here to give some idea of the relationship of the proposed clubhouse to neighbouring properties. So on the west side of the site, that is a distance of 64 metres. On this side of the site, 54 metres from the terrace, 48 metres from the entrance of the two-storey element, and 21 metres from the site boundary to the single-storey element. The other reference on the plan here is the points marked X to X dash, and that is a proposal on the application site side of existing boundary treatments for a 2-metre high acoustic fence along the eastern boundary. At the heart of your decision making today, you must consider whether the replacement sports and social club and pitch, along with the 26 dwellings as enabling development, outweighs harm arising from the loss of open space and the non-provision of affordable housing. Other issues that are covered in the officer's report include the highways and parking implications, impact and mitigation on ecology, loss of trees and their replacements, design, and whether it would improve the character and quality of the area. On obviously the issue of amenity impact, I've presented these separation distances and made reference to an acoustic fence. But the fact that there is going to be a floodlit pitch at this end of the site, it is going to put a new focus of activity. I mean, sport is played on the whole of the site, but potentially more intensively at that northern end of the site. And with the clubhouse moved to the centre of the site, obviously the dynamic in terms of the neighbouring properties that might be more affected by this replacement clubhouse would change from its current location here. If I can then sort of take you through the conclusions that are drawn in the officer's report, bottom of page 38. Overall, the development for replacement community facilities and provision of 26 new homes as enabling development without affordable housing is considered on balance to be justified by the wider public benefits, they're listed on page 30, to outweigh the harm through a loss of existing protected open space under under policy PCS 13. Whilst the overall trip generation would be increased from the existing uses, the Highways Authority is satisfied that the generators for additional traffic, namely Football Academy returning to the site and the new dwellings, will not result in an impact upon local junctions that could be deemed as material to the safe operation of the local highway network, and the proposed accesses to the site are now acceptable. Following modest amendment and, importantly, the use of quality materials, the design is considered good enough for the site. The effect on nature conservation interests are considered capable of mitigation. So that overall, the proposal is considered to satisfactorily demonstrate the achievement of sustainable development in accordance with national and local policy, but subject to planning obligations that are set out as bullet points on page 39, which leads us obviously on to the three recommendations that you've got. The first is to grant conditional permission subject to a Section 106 agreement. The second seeks delegated authority to amend and add conditions where they may be necessary. And the third is delegated authority to refuse the planning application if that Section 106 agreement cannot be completed within a period of 3 months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now come to the deputations. Pat Brooks is the first person that I have, and so would you make your deputation, please, using the microphone. You have 6 minutes.
My main objection to this application is whether the housing and potential enabling development is enough for no affordable housing, and whether there is any need for housing at all. The applicant relies on some spurious numbers which apparently comes from dates in July and October 2017, when 1,000 to 1,600 people used the club on a period of a Thursday to Sunday. This is said to be indicative of the usage of the club every weekend. This is pure fantasy. Over the last 10 days, I have noted that there is probably less than 200 people who have used that club over that same time period. I have lived in the area for 35 years and I live opposite the club, and I've only ever seen a maximum of 200 plus people using that club when the mods and their scooters used to come every bank holiday. They don't even come now. The applicant states that the majority of the users come from the local area. This is definitely not the case. The level of car usage when the club is open with a function would show that people do not come from the local area, because if they did, they wouldn't use their cars, they would walk, and we wouldn't have parking on double yellow lines, over my drive and on the corners of the roads. The wider public benefits advocated by the applicant are pure fantasy. This application is to build a business. It is not to build a community facility. It's going to be a business much as Roco or Goals. There is no wider benefit to the local area. There may be to the Portsmouth area, but there are lots of other clubs out there that provide that. So why is there a need for Moneyfields to do so at the expense of open space? Even the FA, Football Foundation and Sports England believe that what they are building is too big and the wrong pitches. If you take away the figure that the applicants report to be true and substitute for what really is true, there is no benefit. The application is banking on those new facilities to see increased usage. This is not a sure thing. There isn't even a business case. It is more likely that the 4-bed houses that will be built will be bought by buy-to-let and house single people who are house sharing. This will increase the parking needs of each house, but it crucially does not provide affordable housing, which Portsmouth City Council has argued there is a crucial need for. This is the reason why the application should be refused. If the applicant was serious about the enabling development, the land value, being told about 1.1 million, would be ploughed back into the development. It isn't, and this again shows that the application is not about providing local people with much needed community facility. It's about providing the shareholders with a windfall, possibly about £80,000 each. The report states that on balance it justifies the wider public benefit. I would argue the opposite. The report shows that the enabling development is the complete and utter fudge. But we need the profit from the scheme, they will cry. But you can just go to Sports England and to the Football Foundation. You don't need to build this development. Sport England and Football Foundation have monies available for exactly this type of development. There is no need for the enabling development at all. There will be an impact on traffic and coaches accessing the site. Highways have stated that a refuse lorry is now able to turn into the development. However, it appears that a coach will not be able to gain access to the site. What's the point if a coach can't access for a football club? I quote from the report, it says, parking restrictions will have to be reviewed in the vicinity of the access for the sports club, as it has been suggested that coaches will require access to the site. Therefore, dependent on the size of the coaches, areas of yellow line restrictions may be required to ensure adequate turning areas. There is no evidence that the submission that coaches can reach the site and enter and leave in a forward gear. End of quote. Also, the report states, and I quote, the applicant will be unable to implement a consent as access arrangements will not be achieved. The bus service we had to be stopped because the roads are too narrow with the parking of cars and vans. The report contends that parking restrictions will not be needed because of the changes to the site for the refuse trucks. This flies in the face of where the report states that it will be needed if coaches attend the site. If this application is successful, they will be asking for parking restrictions when residents won't be able to fight back. Even when the development is taking place, there will have to be further parking restrictions. We will lose 35 car parking spaces. Where will those cars go? The applicant has agreed a constructive traffic management plan, and as part of this, the draft plan stated that, and I quote, a designated person will walk in front of a construction vehicle travelling along the bus lane with a flag in order to warn pedestrians and cycles of oncoming vehicles. End of quote. Are they really taking this seriously? We don't know what the barriers will be if they open up the bus lane. How will they be secured? There's a cycle lane that is part of the City Council cycle plan. The pathway is too small and the separate cycleway will have to be joined to give lorries enough room. But more importantly, how can the applicant guarantee that the lorries will only use the bus lane within those times? What if a lorry arrives at just after 2:30? Are they going to allow it through then?
Can you begin your summing up, because you've had your 6 minutes?
Okay, I would just like to make then, therefore, one final comment. I find it quite perverse that my two ward councillors are not able to make deputations to this planning committee, yet people who have on social media openly supported the Moneyfield scheme and have paid or accepted gratis for a large poster of their candidate in local elections to appear on the Moneyfield Sports and Social site are still able to sit in judgment of this application. The city solicitor has said the test is, do they retain an open mind when they come to consider the application in the meeting? So basically it's down to your consciences. I hope those members do retain an open mind, but we'll see when the voting takes place. Thank you.
Mr. Robb.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a resident of Salcombe Avenue, and today I not only express my own opposition to the current planning application, but also that of a number of my neighbours, many of whom have already raised their objections in writing, but all of whom will be directly affected by this planning. I'd like to say this isn't about NIMBYism, but a desire to do what is right for all parties to enable everyone in the immediate local community to live in harmony. Secondly, like many in the community, I want what is best for the immediate community and not just what is best for Moneyfield Sports and Social Club PLC. Thirdly, I applaud the work that Moneyfield's Football Club has done with the youth within our community. And I wish them every success, irrespective of what happens today. Opposition's on the grounds of noise pollution. I request that in its current form, this planning application is rejected or deferred on the grounds of noise pollution and on the grounds of the unknown noise with regards to the continuous equivalent noise level and the projected levels. A 2-metre acoustic fence is simply not enough. The original noise assessment report presents a number of mitigating factors. However, there were considerable anomalies and omissions in the original report, many of which I addressed in my original objection letter. However, of major concern is still around the fact that there was no calculations done around the 450 individuals who have the potential to leave the site within a short period late at night. Added to the increased traffic noise and light pollution, there's a realistic probability of an impact on all neighbouring residents. The applicant argues that moving the club from its current site to the new site will be beneficial, as it's moving it away from the present residential location to the centre of the field. I'm sorry, but this is just simply moving the issue to another set of residents. In addition to my original objection comments, I further note in the addendum to protected open space statement submitted by the applicant, the projected weekly usage figures of the site are 3,148. This is over double the original estimate. The proposed 3G pitch will be used 77 hours a week. That is 11 hours a day. And there is a possibility to rent out the proposed function hall for roller discos with the potential of stag and hen do's. Addendum 3 to the open space statement by the applicant. None of these were captured within the original noise impact assessment. And note in the Environmental Officer's report on the 18th of February, the service has received a number of complaints in the past relating to entertainment and rowdy behaviour. Should the Planning Committee see fit to approve this application, I believe the Environmental Officer's recommendation 3 does not go far enough. I request that a legal condition is placed upon the applicant to conduct a full and comprehensive noise impact assessment with recommended mitigation measures taking into account the fully anticipated use of the site in line with their submitted figures. Furthermore, it is requested that Moneyfield Sports and Social Club PLC will be responsible for maintaining these measures. Opposition on the potential to flood. I also request that this planning application is rejected or deferred on the grounds of risk of flooding. Another major concern is the effect that this development will have on the local watercourse and realistic increased risk of flooding. Further residential development of Salcombe Avenue and the building of Burfield Road in the 60s had a detrimental impact on the local watercourse within the immediate area. This led to the gardens and the end of the field flooding. There is absolutely no mention within the flood risk assessment or planning application of the land drain that was installed by the City Council circa 1970. This land drain herringbones into the gardens from number 25 Salcombe Avenue North, and out across the field and prevents flooding. This is of huge concern to the neighbours of Salcombe Avenue, that the land drainage structure be damaged by excavation work. The existing structure is adapted, partially disconnected or partially removed as part of grounds work. The loss of such large soakage area of the field with a 3G pitch and the building and the oversight and the hard standing for car parking, will all lead to the loss of a natural soakage area and additional surface runoff and may bring back flooding to those areas. It is therefore requested that should the Planning Committee see fit to approve this application, a legal condition is placed upon the applicant to conduct a full survey of the site to identify the existing land drains, and furthermore the applicant will be responsible for conducting a full risk assessment and implementation of mitigating measures and will be responsible for the installation and maintaining of land drainage infrastructure up to the boundaries of all neighbouring properties. Aesthetics.
Could you you've had your 6 minutes, could you bring yourself to a conclusion, please?
Okay. So, just finally, I'd just like to note, I note that Councillor Jones is sat on the Planning Committee, and I asked the City's legal advisor to advise on whether an individual who has on a number of occasions openly supported this application and who is still on record in the public domain as doing so can remain impartial as is required by a member of this Planning Committee.
I shall ask for legal advice immediately on that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a point that was picked up by the City Solicitor previously, as the previous Deputy has alluded to, provided that any member is approaching the committee with an open mind as a matter of their own conscience, then they are permitted to vote.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Chair, can I
Yes.
just re-ask that? I just heard from a member of the public, it is in the public domain. Somebody has given their opinion, and therefore they've given an opinion. And I, as a councillor, have always taken the view that if something of that nature was under question, therefore, whether it's a conscience or not, I should not be here. I'm interested what you mean by just saying I could say anything I want before I come here, but then you're saying as long as I come with a clear mind, tell you I've got a clear mind, I can sit here.
Right.
Clarify that matter, please.
To expand on that, politicians are expected to have political views. We are a political organisation. The key thing is that you must not have predetermined the matter. That is to close your mind to any other particular outcome. As long as you are weighing pros and cons in a balance, you are doing your job by being here. So the fact that a member has expressed a particular opinion, as long as it's not entirely absolute, that won't bar them from voting.
I think it is worth noting that the legal advice on this from the government, as well as locally, has developed quite considerably over the past 3 to 4 years. It is expected that councillors will hold views, but they are required to come to this meeting to judge on planning issues only and to ensure that they have an open mind. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. And for members of the public who are not au fait with the rules in public life and in particular our constitution and our standing order, it is for the member concerned to make the decision about whether or not they have a predetermined position on an application. And for the record, because I've got nothing to hide whatsoever, I was first approached by Moneyfield Sports Club 2 years ago as leader of the council and the cabinet member with responsibility for planning, economic development and regeneration. Claire Upton-Brown and I were involved together. Officers have always been involved when I've had any conversation with the Moneyfields Club about planning. They talked to us about the concept of putting some housing on there. There was no mention of flats at that point. It was simply some houses. They didn't even know how many. They talked about 6, 10, whatever. And in concept, you know, Claire and I were not in a position to sit there and say, yes, that looks great, you will get planning permission, but they were asking us if we thought it would be relevant. We, of course, noted to them the loss of public open space and the sports provision, open grassland, that they would have to overcome. I've never predetermined on the planning merits specifically. We've talked about concepts in the past. The first time I read this report fully and saw the outline, application and the images was about 2 days ago when I read the report, and what I've seen today is the most information I've ever seen. I have not been privy to any of this information prior to today. I sit here as someone who has undertaken full legal planning training, and I sit here making the decision today based on the merits of the application.
Thank you. We now move on. I would ask people in the public gallery not to applaud or to otherwise show their opinions. They are there in the public gallery to observe. It does make the job of the councillors that much more difficult if we get interruption from the public gallery. I now come to the applicant and the applicant's agent, who they have 12 minutes between them. If I might start with Mr. Matthew Pickup of Pickup Town Planning, who is the agent.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Matthew Pickup, the Schemes Planning Consultant, and at the table with me are Kat Close, the Moneyfields FC Youth Development Officer, and Pete Seedon, Director of Moneyfields Sports and Social Club and also Acting Chairman of Moneyfields FC. Together we will make a joint deputation. As members will be aware from Mr Banting's presentation, this application proposes the redevelopment of Moneyfields Sports and Social Club, including the provision of a new all-weather grass pitch together with 26 dwellings fronting onto Moneyfield Avenue. In short, the profits obtained from the sale of the 26 dwellings would help fund the provision of the new club facilities and a new artificial grass pitch. The housing development would therefore represent enabling development that would secure the club's future well into the 21st century. Members of the committee may well have seen the headlines in the press over the last week which have focused upon the provision of housing on this site. I would have written those headlines differently. To my mind, this application is all about saving and improving, almost beyond recognition, one of the city's last remaining community clubs. As Mr Banting has explained, the proposed development has to be considered in relation to Portsmouth Plan Policy PCS 13, a greener Portsmouth. This policy states that applications which would result in a net loss of existing open space will be refused unless there are wider public benefits from the development which would outweigh the harm. Contrary to what the earlier speakers have said, I would argue that there are significant public benefits that outweigh the loss of some of the existing open space. These are the retention of a much-loved 60-year-old local community club that currently serves between 1,000 and 1,600 people each week. The improved facilities would encourage a greater participation in sport by the local and wider Portsmouth community, which would be in accordance with policy PCS 14, a healthy Portsmouth. The re-establishment of a football academy, serving local children. During the daytime, the provision of a creche or other child-minding facilities. The provision of a high-quality space that would be used by community-based clubs similar to those found in a village hall. The provision of on-site parking facilities for club members and visitors, reducing competition for on-street parking in the immediate area when in use on match days and for functions. The provision of one of the city's only full-size floodlit 3G pitches, which would remain playable even in wet weather conditions throughout the year. It should also be noted that the proposed all-weather pitch forms part of the Council's adopted playing pitch strategy. Moneyfields is identified as a site that is currently overplayed and in need of a 3G pitch. The housing element of this scheme is effectively a means to an end. Nevertheless, it is an extremely important part of the scheme, with the revenue raised from the sale of these homes helping to fund the provision of the club and sports facilities. This development will deliver a mix of dwellings ranging from 1 and 2 bedroom flats to 4 bedroom family homes built on brownfield land in accordance with the Portsmouth Plan policies PCS 10 and PCS 19. As Mr Banting has explained, this application will be the subject of both a Section 106 legal agreement and a community use agreement. The 106 would ensure the new club facilities were constructed at the same time as the semi-detached houses, and the houses could not be sold or occupied until the club building was substantially complete. The community use agreement would ensure that the all-weather pitch was made available for hire to the wider Portsmouth community for around 70 hours each week, or about 80% of the time it's operational. When considered in the planning balance, it is my view that the development proposed by Moneyfields would provide the city with a very important community asset that would benefit the people of Portsmouth for many years to come. On a personal note, having worked in planning for over 30 years, I can honestly say that this is the best community development I have ever worked on. Granting planning permission would genuinely have multiple social, health, education and economic benefits, providing new, high-quality and sustainable facilities for both the local and wider Portsmouth community. I now pass over to Cat Close. Thank you, Chairman.
Good afternoon. My name is Cat Close. I'm the Secretary for the Moneyfields Under-7 to Under-16 teams. I would like to say a few words about how absolutely vital it is to the local community that this application is granted permission. It would secure the long-term future of Moneyfields Football Club and continue to give the hundreds of children we work with somewhere secure and safe to go and play football. I've been involved with the club for 8 years as a parent and as a volunteer. This season we have 10 teams that play in the Portsmouth Youth Football League and the Hampshire Girls Youth League. All clubs need to have a minimum charter standard to be accepted into these leagues. This ensures that the players can play in a safe and secure environment, and parents can be confident knowing this. We have achieved this standard with hard work from staff and volunteers involved in the club. There are many benefits gained by playing organised football. Players meet and play alongside peers they know and make associates with those from other areas. Some of these are friendships that can be kept for life. Being part of a team provides a real sense of belonging, improves social skills and contributes to higher levels of self-esteem. It also builds a good bond between parents and their children, sharing in something they all love and can do together. Playing regularly for a team is a positive addition to a child's routine, giving them something healthy and enjoyable to focus on. It helps to sustain the environment through protecting open space and natural areas. Moneyfields provides a route from under-7 to senior football. Most clubs finish their league at the age of under-16s, which means players need to find other clubs that offer under-18 football. These teams will have their own players that have come through their own system, having priority for the limited spaces. In the Portsmouth Youth Football Sunday League, there are 45 clubs that participate, ranging from Bognor to Whiteley. This season, there are over 4,000 registered players playing in this league alone. There are only 10 clubs that offer the under-18 football, with only 5 in the Portsmouth area, including Moneyfields. With fewer spaces than players, many will not have the opportunity of continuing playing into adulthood. Moneyfields Club is the second biggest club in Portsmouth. 90% of the membership lives in Baffins, Copnett and Milton area. If we cannot offer players football, they will have nowhere to go. I am turning players away due to the facilities we can offer at present. During the season on a Sunday, I can have up to 150 youngsters involved in matches, most supported on the sidelines by parents, grandparents and other family members. I'm increasingly concerned about the deteriorating conditions of the grounds, and it is disheartening for the players when their matches are called off because of it. They train and prepare themselves for the matches during the week and they're then left with time on their hands and can have a knock-on effect for all the family. The council pitches are completely overused and impossible to book, especially at short notice. Clubs that don't have private facilities rely on them for their matches and they take priority. People not involved in football may think it's just kids kicking about, which they can do down the park between themselves. But playing in a structured league under a proper club is a pathway into future sporting careers. I work with the professional football academies, including Portsmouth, Southampton and Bournemouth. They contact me if they're interested in a player and I inform them where the player will be playing. I also make recommendations to them and their representatives will come and watch the teams. Grassroots football is a platform for these youngsters to pursue their career in football. We have players that have come through the youth system at Moneyfields that play for Moneyfields senior team, the National League and the teams in higher leagues such as Hampton and Waterlooville. My 22-year-old son is Ben Close, who is now a professional footballer playing in the first team for Portsmouth. He came through via the grassroots football. Regarding the argument that the area will be busier, I think it's important to say that the proposed development would improve significantly local parking facilities in the area. On match days and at the weekends, we are aware that parking is a congestion on local streets, with people trying to find parking spaces. However, club part of this proposal would replace the existing 20 spaces with 80 spaces. Surely this would improve the situation locally. Please can I ask you to support this planning application to improve our community facilities, which would secure the long-term future of all our children's football. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name's Pete Seedon. My family have lived in Baffins for over 40 years. My dad still lives less than 100 yards from the club. I've always used the club, but I got more involved in around 2001 when I volunteered to help out with the running of the kids' football, which I thoroughly enjoyed for over 8 years. I was then asked to get even more involved behind the scenes in around 2008 as the club was at risk of closure due to financial and facility difficulties. The shareholders managed to raise some money to temporarily refurbish the club to try and buy some time to come up with a solution to secure the long-term future of Moneyfield Sports and Social Club once and for all. And after many false dawns, we now feel we have achieved this with this application. That is why I'm here today on behalf of the shareholders with what we feel is a well thought out plan which would secure the long-term future of the club. Moneyfields is not just a football club, it is so much more than that. Not only does it host everything from christenings, birthdays, weddings and funerals, we also host regular afternoons for the Blind Association and other meeting place for Weight Watchers and numerous other local organisations. We also used to have an academy based at the club hosting over 60 16 to 18-year-olds, but they had to leave 2 years ago due to the poor facilities. We are also a registered rest centre for Portsmouth City Council in times of emergency, which was last used a few years ago to a gas leak in Dover Road. Anyone can currently use the club. There are no restrictions. You can pop in and use the club at any time. You can also become a member for as little as £25 annually, which basically allows you a cheap drink and priority for any events held at the club. This is truly the last throw of the dice for Moneyfields. We feel we have tried to think of everyone and everything when putting together this application and have spent over 2 years trying to get this right. We truly have nowhere else to go, and the shareholders have agreed that if we should fail today and at a subsequent appeal, we would have no choice but to close the club and put it up for sale. As we feel, if we can't get the support of our own local council for a true community club currently used by over 1,500 people weekly, then what is the point of trying to carry on? The problem is not getting people through the door, it's that the facilities have basically had it. The whole thing is like a patchwork quilt. Everything leaks and the heating works when it wants. I could go on forever about the state of the building. If it wasn't for the help of local builders, plumbers and general volunteers, it would probably already be closed. The proposed 3G pitch would also make a huge difference, not from a revenue stream point of view, but as an example, due to the bad weather around last Christmas, The club went around 8 to 12 weeks with hardly any kids' football being played due to the pitches being constantly unfit. So please don't be the council that refuses this application and forces one of the last community clubs in Portsmouth to close. Who knows what could eventually end up on this 7-acre site in the middle of Portsmouth if we are forced to close. Sport England agrees this needs to happen, the majority of people in Portsmouth agree this needs to happen, and your own professional planning officers agree this needs to happen. I would hate in a few years' time we are all sat here saying why we turned down this great scheme. The people and local kids will have nowhere to go, and another community facility would have to close, when all you hear from local councils is the need to retain local community facilities like ours. I'm finishing now. You now have the chance to support one. Once it's gone forever. Thanks for your time, and I'm sure you'll make the correct decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin, I've had a couple of things come to me in the last 24 hours. I beg your indulgence with the ability to put this forward. I have received today a petition from 22 residents of Highgate Road who object to certain particular aspects of it, particularly noise and the loss of Lombardy poplar trees. It's come to me since about 12 o'clock today, so I have no idea whether I can submit this to the committee or what weight the committee will offer that.
I believe you can submit it, and the weight that the members will put upon it depends upon each of them.
Right.
And your second?
My second one is that I've been asked by someone who cannot be here today, Kevin Gollidge of Redcar Avenue, to read out his opinions of the development. Again, I beg your indulgence of you and the legal officer as to whether that is possible.
I have been very strict on timing. If you believe, I'll be slightly more lenient with you, Councillor, but if you believe that within 6 to 8 minutes you can read Mr. Gollidge's and make your point, yes, you may read it.
Okay, I will start with my own thoughts and then move to Mr. Gollidge's, if I may. Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I want to thank planning officers, especially Alan Banting, for briefing me on this application. Protecting open space in this city matters. People regularly ask me if the council is going to allow development on Milton Common or Great Saltons in the ward in the area I represent. I say no because it's protected open space. That becomes harder if you accept this application, as it will cut that space. Those who want to protect the open space by St James's Hospital Chapel, for instance, fear that approving this puts that under threat. Developers who offer fewer benefits than Moneyfields will be watching this decision with interest. Our policy is clear. There can be no such building on this space unless the benefit to the community outweighs that loss. Now, I know the club has been, as has been outlined, has been very clear with officers on what they think that means, and that is reflected in Mr Banting's report. My job, as a local councillor, is to argue for another group who should benefit from these plans too, the club's neighbours. Some of them, mainly members, tell me they like it. Many others disagree. They tell me they remember when they could use the club for bowling, or tennis, or to park their car. This community feels the club is not there for them anymore. They tell me they've heard nothing from the club about this application since last year's exhibition. They tell me that the many ideas they gave the club then have been ignored. Certainly, Mr Banting has said to me that what's before you has had only minor tweaks from what was shown then. That's a real missed opportunity for what should be a community-led scheme. Now, I'm not against expanding football clubs. The hours spent with planning, trying to ensure Baffin's Milton Rovers secured its Kendall Wharf ground show that. Indeed, talking with people involved with that club over the weekend, that work has meant that the club has grown to such an extent that it says it doesn't. The people I spoke to say they don't need the new Moneyfields pitches any longer, even though they said they did some time ago. Therefore, this community doesn't actually want the club to close. What it wants, if you approve these plans, is to ensure that what goes ahead deals with their biggest problems. The first is parking. And it's not just on match days, it's 7 days a week. 79% of respondents to these surveys which we as local councillors sent out, wanted the new visitor car park to be open to non-members to help tackle that. Residents in Dover Road said that to me only last weekend. I note that page 11 of the committee report asks for that to be considered during periods of low demand. We have a massive parking problem in North Baffins. Doing that will generate more spaces than the council car parks at Baffins Pond and Great Saltons put together. Now, when I've put this to club members who've rung me, I was told that residents should join the club and that it was like opening up a private garage to members. I don't know why they would say that. I cannot believe this opportunity will close the club. Indeed, as Mr Seiden has outlined, and the club's own community benefit statement on page 30 of the committee report says it's not a members-only club. Non-members currently use the bar, the function hall, the AstroTurf pitch, boxing hall and gym. The club wants them to use the new facilities, so why is the car park different? Security worries are nothing. The gates at the security gates mentioned amongst the conditions in the report, and a key fob cannot cure. We should put this concept, as per the parking team's advice on page 11 of the report, in the legal agreement. The second issue is housing. Now, as Cabinet Member for Housing, I get a lot of complaints about why we don't have enough housing in the city, and frankly, we're meant to build more homes than we could theoretically cope with. Therefore, it's an important matter to me in my job, but it's also an important matter listening to the people I represent. And reading the representations on the website, many supporters said the plans gave homes for Baffin's people. If only that were true. This is yet another application that does not provide affordable accommodation, and that's one of the points in Mr Golledge's report, that there should be accommodation as well. Baffin's people, especially the young, tell me they would stay in the area if the price is right. Doing so would benefit the community, all our community, not just some. Now, I suspect that if you insisted on affordable housing in all circumstances, the club may win on appeal. If members still want to refuse on those grounds, and given comments on other applications, there may be a couple of takers for that, be my guest. So can I suggest another way? We should, in the legal agreement, ask that the club prioritises Baffin's residents when offering the new homes. There are plenty of packages out there that can help them do that, and I'm more than happy to help the club deliver that. This is not a guarantee. If Baffin's people show no interest, they don't get the houses. However, doing it shows that the club is serious about helping local people, and I'm sure, as a community facility, Moneyfields would support that if members obliged. I also asked, as happened with the Kingston Prison application, we review the viability statement to take account of market conditions just before the homes are due on the market. This also will help affordability. The third issue I pick up from this group of people is what happens next. Many people think the club will come back in 5 or 10 years' time and say it needs to expand further. Mr Seiden has been very clear today, but that won't happen. But for those people who believe that, that means opening the bus lane at Moneyfields Avenue, more traffic, more problems. And as Mr Seiden, I think, implied, I don't think the club wants to do that. If it did, it'll do it now. That's why I think it would be happy to include the legal agreement a commitment not to develop the site significantly again if it will lead to the opening of that bus lane. Now, colleagues, none of the things that I've outlined will close the club. They will show neighbours, though, that the club wants to benefit their futures as well as its own, and tell others who may want to build on protected open space that this council will drive the hardest possible bargain. Therefore, I propose, Chair, that you ask colleagues to decide whether each of these principles, these 3 principles I've outlined, should be put into the legal agreement with the club, community and planners working out the details. Then replace recommendation 1 with an expanded recommendation 3 that covers the legal and section 106 agreements. Recommendation 2 would stay the same. This would force the club, planners, local councillors and neighbours to work together to make the plan benefit everyone without the possibility of the club closing. If you reject this plan today, Mr Seiden has said, well, what will the site become? I can tell him now that the site will not become a housing estate or a goods yard, because if you refuse it on the grounds of protected open space, those two don't apply.
Can you
it may be, I have one more paragraph, Chair. It could become a playing field or an allotment. More HGVs will not be coming down local roads if you refuse it today. They could barely fit if they could. Agreeing with the balanced suggestion I offer gives the council, the club and local people the chance to ensure that this development works for everyone. It also tells those less scrupulous than Moneyfields that this council will drive the hardest possible bargain to protect its open space. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume that Mr. Golledge's points were incorporated in that.
The main one. Sorry, Chair. The main one is around the need to protect affordable housing and to refuse it if we do not.
Thank you.
If we do not do that. Thank you, Chair.
Members. We have had the issues outlined to us today, and we have also had a further suggestion from Councillor Sanders. The issues are quite clearly the principle of location. Is this the right place for development? The issue of whether what is still a private club offers public benefit to compensate adequately for the loss of protected open space, the lack of affordable housing. There are then issues on the quality of the design, both of the housing and of the clubhouse itself. We then come to the question of the amenity of local people, which has been raised by a number of the deputies, question of car parking, question of transport, questions of noise. These, I think, are the main issues, and I would stress to members that we have to discuss this on the planning merits of the scheme, not on any other matter. The planning merits of the scheme are what we are required to make our decision upon. So can I have questions from members, please?
Thank you, Chair. If I can just ask, that presentation there from Councillor Sanders, which is in a way reflecting local community, I have no problem with the overall scheme. I can see the benefit. I'm having a judgment call on what is a nebulous thing called the overall benefit to the city, because I've read through and clearly looking at the points raised there, I can clearly see that it will benefit the club and to some extent it benefit other people, but in terms of trying to make sure it benefits local people and there's no planning framework for this of deciding what is an overall benefit for the city. It's a list of things. Those three things that were suggested by Councillor Sanders, which would return some balance for local people, can I have some advice on whether they can be incorporated, how that's viewed in planning and legal terms? Thank you.
Okay, so my understanding of the views expressed by Councillor Sanders are around whether a Section 106 agreement could require the parking to be available for local residents, whether the housing could be on a first sort of basis available to local people, and that there be no further development beyond this scheme in the future, and then consequential effects on the bus lane. I hope that's a fair synopsis. The first issue around the parking is something that has been raised by officers, and I know it was raised by residents in the public consultation, but it isn't something that's being offered by the club, and as a consequence it isn't something that we can impose on them. It would be their gift if they wanted to offer a planning obligation around who might use that car park outside of when it's needed by any of the activities taking place at Moneyfields Club. The second issue about the ability of a Section 106 to limit the accommodation to local individuals is not a policy that the city has, and I'm kind of struggling a bit with how that could be something that is ever reasonable to impose on a developer. Although I'm sure if local residents were interested in buying those local properties, the club would be delighted with that. And then somehow to limit by Section 106 agreement the fact there couldn't be any further sort of future expansion, I kind of undermines the fact that if there is any other development that the club wanted in the future, then the way that they would go about that would be through a new planning application and having the merits of that properly considered by the committee of the day. So I'm sorry, Councillor Sanders, I don't believe any of those would be reasonable to impose on the applicants. I don't know whether you had anything more to add, Claire.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, in some circumstances, you might have a situation where a council has a policy where there's local residents are offered affordable housing, but if it's open market housing, I simply don't see how that could be imposed in 106, and we certainly couldn't prevent further applications coming forward through a 106.
So, Chair, as a follow-up, obviously is SB 13 green open spaces, in other words, mitigating circumstances, etc. So how do we define mitigating circumstances if we were to say we've obviously heard some mitigating circumstances? I'm just trying to understand how we would imply that.
That's a judgment. It's planning judgment whether or not you think the case that has been put forward today around the club and its circumstances and what it's proposing and the consequence of losing that open space is whether the justification outweighs the harm. It's a planning judgment. We can't give you a guidance or a tick box on that, unfortunately.
Councillor Stubbs.
I was just going to add that ultimately that on the screen there is the list of points that are in the report and mentioned by the planning agent, and the weight to which you would put to any or all of those, again, is part of your judgment call. Obviously, from the officer's point of view, we feel there is enough, and it is an on-balance recommendation, and it obviously is based on those matters there, with the key point in that green box: harm from building on protected open space would be unacceptable unless wider public benefits outweigh the loss. That is the planning balance that you are making today.
Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to take this discussion a little bit further. I mean, there are, on the three items, I mean, I would have said that two of them are not only not sensible planning judgments, but would also be illegal, and I would like to confirm that. So the first of those is to have something about, preventing a club submitting a future planning application. Now, to my understanding of this, you can't ask people to give away their rights like that. It's just, against the law. Can you confirm whether that's the case? I'll come back.
Yes, so as Alan said, the suggested Section 106 obligations wouldn't, from a planning professional's perspective, be reasonable, which would mean that Regulation 122 of the Community Infrastructure Levy regulations are brought into play, and that would be barred from being imposed on a Section 106 agreement.
The other one I was going to ask about is about this, frankly, ludicrous idea that new housing should be restricted to people from the neighbouring streets, which, on the face of it, apart from anything else, I mean, apart from any other merits on it, will be capable of challenge because of, you could challenge that as indirect racial discrimination, because Bathins is whiter than the city as a whole and the country as a whole, and therefore it would be illegal under those grounds. Would that not be the case?
That sounds rather bold. I wouldn't like to give an absolute view on that, but if that's something you'd like to take up later on, perhaps.
It would be rather questionable to restrict ownership in, to people from neighbouring streets. I've never heard of anything like that before, certainly not in an urban area.
Yeah, I think without wanting to labour the point, that sort of provision in a 106 you may expect to find when you're dealing with affordable housing, usually in a rural environment. But this is open market housing. I think it would be highly questionable if you as a committee decided today that you would only grant planning permission if there's a clause in a 106 saying it's open market housing, but you can only sell it to the people in the next two roads.
It reads to me like this whole thing is about a misunderstanding from Councillor Sanders about what rights you have as a private property owner. We can't use and abuse the planning process to take away people's property rights, not just over the parking and other issues as well.
I'm trying to keep this to questions rather than comments, Councillor Stubbs. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. I had 3 questions, 2 of which, or 1 of which has been covered, but I just want to clarify the others. First of all, the parking spaces. You know, my concerns about the proposal in front of us, it's not so much about the concept of the use of the space and having some residential in there. The city has a housing need of 19,900 homes over the next 20 years. Where are they going to go? So it's not so much about putting some residential on there, it's about the impact on the neighbours. That's probably my biggest concern, and one of those obviously is around parking. Now, am I right in thinking that there are currently 30 spaces, which is what the report says? There'll be 65 that will be around the clubhouse, up the entrance and into that back section in the kind of middle of the whole area. The houses will have their own dedicated parking space. What about the flats? Are the flats included within the 65, or do they have separate parking? I can't remember from the. I guess there's some space around them, but it's hard to see.
Okay. The club, yes, has 30 currently, and including it's sort of described as sort of overspill, just marked in sort of, this area in here. I think the report refers to 85. So you're going to tell me I'm wrong?
No, sorry. It says 65 in the top line on paragraph 1, 2, 4 of 10, and it does actually say 85 at the bottom. You're right, of the same paragraph. I missed that, sorry.
Okay. So it's an increase from 30 to 85 on the club itself. The houses have 2 allocated spaces plus a garage, so that is some over-provision for those 4-bedroom houses. I think with 1 visitor space. With regards to the 1 and 2 bedroom flats, that is 1 allocated space per flat plus 7 visitor spaces. So there is over provision on the housing, appropriate provision for the flats, and obviously an increase in parking available to serve the club. Now, the fear, obviously, with providing more parking is that it may encourage more people to drive to the site, but a pragmatic view was taken by Highways around the fact that there are already significant numbers of people coming to that club and competing for the available on-street spaces. So the 85 was considered to be reasonable and appropriate.
I've got 2 other questions, Councillor Mason, if that's okay. Thank you for that, and I will save my comments for the comment section. The homes to be sold to Baffin's people first is one of the other questions I was going to ask. Is that legally permissible? Obviously it's not, but it's been covered. The third question is around noise, and this is maybe a question for the planning officer. There are 7 or 8 different professional reports that have had to come in, one of them being the traffic impact assessment, the other one being a noise impact assessment. And in the deputations, Mr. Rob made comment about the impact to him on his neighbouring property on the noise impact. Which I think is a valid point. Is he entitled to see a copy of that noise impact statement if he requests, or is that document sort of confidential for the planning authority?
There's a raft of documents submitted in support of the application, including the noise report that is available to view by the public. In fact, I think Mr. Robb did sort of reference the fact that you've seen the report.
Yeah, I've seen the report, I've read the report, and as I said, there is a number of omissions in that report.
I was just wanting confirmation that it is in the public domain. So
yes,
that report is in the public domain. Yes.
Thank you, that's my questions.
Councillor Smythe, then Councillor Bernard-Jackson. Councillor Smythe.
My question is about the statements we've been given by officers, and I'd like to ask them a further question about why we can't put a condition on, or why indeed the applicant is not offering to share the parking with residents when they're not using it themselves for events. I think we have to move as a city, given that we've got so little parking available, that places that have private people who have allocated parking that is often vacant at night needs to be used by local residents. For example, in Southsea, Waitrose allows local residents and visitors to the King Theatre to use their car park. It makes a considerable difference in our neighbourhood. I'm somewhat surprised that your advice is we can't ask the applicant to do that, and I'd like to ask that question again. Why can't we ask them? And secondly, why won't they offer it? Because that would considerably put in my mind the balance of the wider public benefit of losing the green open space.
Right. It was something that has been raised in discussions. It's something that was raised by local residents. And the point that I was making is that we can't impose it on the applicant. It's a private car park, and we can't dictate how they manage their parking spaces. But if they were wanting to offer it up as part of the package of wider public benefits, it is within their gift to do that. But it isn't something they have chosen to do.
Just a supplementary, we had a discussion about the local plan last night, and this came up as a wider issue for across the city. If we had it in the local plan, could we then put it in as a condition?
If I pick that one up, no, it would still have to be by agreement, because we can't enforce something to happen in that way. And in the local plan, it wouldn't be as concrete as you have to do, because we can't shape policy in that way. So it would be more softer, encouraging, facilitating, etc., to overcome the issue we have within the city around lack of space for parking.
Okay, my question then is really a question for the developers as to why they are not considering that. It would make an enormous difference, I think, to this planning application.
The trouble we've got is people park there, go out for the day, leave their cars there, and then if someone's paid to come to a function or play football, they expect parking. And we've had massive trouble with people leaving their cars there, going away, no numbers left. We even tried to put in place leave your numbers, but they never do.
I mean,
it's not saying we won't do, but we're not going to offer it.
Just with modern electronic means and taking note of people's bank account details and that sort of thing, that could be overcome.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. I've got a series of questions, I'm sorry to say, but that's helpful in terms from the club about the view about parking, because I think that closes that off as a potential offer. In the report it says that the time that this can be used till is 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. And looking at the figures that the club have given in terms of usage, they've said that 70 hours a week would be for hire and another 20% available for the club to use. So that's 84 hours a week, which is 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Is 11 o'clock at night an appropriate time when the standard we have, for instance, for pubs, clubs, etc., to take their chairs and tables off the pavement because we don't want people outside being noisy and keeping people up in residential areas, is 9:30 at night? Is 11 o'clock for a group of people playing football, which can be rowdy with supporters? Is that an appropriate final time in a planning brief like this?
I think the starting point with that question is that the site already has a lawful use for sport and recreation. Now, as part of these proposals, I think you would have heard me mention the fact that it is placing the clubhouse and activity centrally in the site. So it is different residents that are going to be affected. And I think as part of, again, the Planning Balancing Act, the hours that were intended for use by the applicant, I think are reasonable to require by condition for that 11 o'clock finish to cease, because it is different residents that are being affected. Because 11 o'clock till 7 is the time when people are normally sleeping. So it's kind of a combination of, it already has a lawful use without any sort of restrictions other than any licensing requirements that are on the clubhouse, and 11 o'clock is considered to be a sort of reasonable and acceptable sort of hour for that activity to cease.
So, and my understanding, looking at the papers, it says the sports facility should be closed at 11 o'clock at night. There's nothing to say that the clubhouse needs to be closed at 11 o'clock at night. And if people apply for a late licence, then that would be later than that. So it's pitches. It says the floodlights go off at 10 o'clock at night. But it's saying the sports facilities, doesn't say all facilities on page 15, paragraph 7.
Chairman, sorry, could I just clarify? It is the intention that the all-weather pitch would only be used until 10 o'clock at night, not 11 o'clock at night.
I kind of presume that on the basis there wouldn't be any floodlighting and people playing on the all-weather pitch in the dark probably wouldn't work. But it's whether it's saying that the others, whatever might else be going on in terms of sports facilities, can go on for an hour later than that, and then that's not limiting Clubhouse to that time as well.
Can I invite you to have a look on page 44? The suggested condition 25 says the use of the site for indoor-outdoor sport and recreation shall cease with the associated clubhouse premises closed to and vacated of customers between 2300 and 0800 hours.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. The other bit is, and this is a really difficult one, I think, for all of us, because it is a matter of trying to balance different things. And the chairman said at the beginning we need to make sure that what we address is the planning issues. And I go back to the reason that another application on the site was refused in 2008, 10 years ago. And I want to know the advice, Mr. Banting, in terms of the first 3 reasons for refusal, and what has changed since that application was refused. So the first one talks about the absence of sufficient information to demonstrate an appropriate level of the improved open space can be retained through the development, etc., and what the community benefit is. The second is in terms of the Brent Geese stuff. And the third is about lack of affordable housing. Now, my reading of the application would say all those 3 things need to be addressed and be substantially different from when a similar application was refused 10 years ago. Could you walk me through what the substantial differences are between the application 10 years ago, which was refused, and this application now to address those 3 points?
The 2008 refusal had included a proposal for 48 dwellings. So it's not half, but it's nearly half of the number of homes as part of the proposal. So if we take
Mr. Banting, sorry, it doesn't mention that. Item 3 is about the absence of affordable housing. It's not about the number of properties, it's about the absence of affordable housing. Could you explain to me how this application, which was refused 10 years ago because there was no affordable housing, is different from this application today, which offers no affordable housing, and how you can overcome that reason for refusal 10 years ago?
I was trying to set in context how this proposal is different from the one in 2008. So, forgive me, it is a little more than half of the number of dwellings that were proposed on that site previously. But in going through them sort of sequentially, the first one, the loss of open space, ultimately either the evidence that was presented or the judgment being made by the decision makers at that point in time, in having to weigh up exactly the same balancing act that you're having to do now. Obviously, they came to a conclusion that and the other problem is that the policy wording in PCS 13 is slightly different now from the then policy in DC 20. But even if we equate what the policy now talks of wider public benefits, and it was held that that did not outweigh the loss of open space. The Brent Geese, there aren't any, Brent Geese haven't been found to use that site and there's no objection from Natural England or from the city's ecologists. And obviously then the third issue is the decision makers took the view that there was insufficient justification for the replacement sports facilities and 48 new homes in terms of whatever the offer was at that point in time, and the loss of open space. The same exercise will have been done back in 2008 as it is now, but perhaps without the evidence provided by the current applicants.
And Chairman, can I ask, my understanding from the paperwork is this was an appeal decision, so this was a decision which was refused at the City Council level, and that the planning inspector in Bristol also decided to refuse it on those grounds. It says an appeal which was dismissed. Page 5, 3 paragraphs on the bottom.
But that relates to the application in April 1993.
Okay, so this one withdrawn. Okay, no, thank you. That's very useful.
There wasn't an appeal on the June 2008.
And that. Okay, so it was a local decision to say no.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Udi.
Just a question for my own knowledge, really. Is there a legal requirement to provide disabled parking spaces? I did see 3. Is there like a quota that you have to have for a number of parking spaces?
Yes, 5%.
Is it met with the 3?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Also, there was a lift in the building, wasn't there, in the clubhouse?
That's caught me out. I can check for you.
There's a yes from the applicant.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillor Bernard-Jackson.
Sorry, I'm just picking up something. Was a couple of slightly conflicting things that came out. One was saying from people that that there's big demand, and I think we've had the new ground for the Baffins one seems to have worked very well, and the new ground for Milton Meon again seems to work extremely well. But one of the things that came to us as councillors a while ago was that some of the pitches in the city were significantly underused, and there wasn't the demand for them, and therefore it was recommended to us that we remove some of the football pitches. So I'm just trying to balance up the issue about there's lots of demand on one side, but
Where were not used?
I think they were Great Sultans.
Can the questions come through the chair, please? Councillor Bernard-Jackson.
And the second thing I'd like to ask through the chair is the Football Foundation is saying that their view is that they I think from my reading is that they think a smaller artificial pitch would be the right thing on here and not a full-sized one. And I'd just be interested to know why the view was taken that not to take that advice.
I think that those are simple. Mr. Banting, can you answer both of those?
With regards to the comments made through Sport England from Football Foundation, any shortcomings in the design and layout for the artificial pitch has been adequately resolved now. There are no outstanding issues with regards to that. On page 29, the applicants provided some other information, and so there's a paragraph that starts, the applicant's comment, it is understood that the specific recommendations relating to Moneyfield, sorry, this is the council's playing pitch strategy, as detailed in the initial action plan within that playing pitch strategy, have been revised with the agreement of all relevant parties to recommend the provision of a full-size 3G pitch at Moneyfields rather than that smaller size that you were talking about mentioned by the Football Foundation.
And finally, and my understanding, this is, if we're going to say yes to this, in effect, this is an exception site. There's a thing that says we should protect public open space, but we can choose to ignore that if we think the community benefit is in that direction. It seems to me that that's exactly the thing that happens with housing sites where local people are the only people who are allowed to buy or rent them is on exception sites which would not normally get planning permission, which is exactly this sort of thing and happens across the country. So it is an exception site. It might be something that we could look at. I know we've not done it before, but it is it would be an interesting place to try it for the first time.
The question is, I think, would you be willing to give this matter further consideration?
I think we've already come to a conclusion that within the policy framework that we have, there wouldn't be any way of securing those homes for local people. Speculate on whether that could be included in a future local plan.
I think, again, picking up that point from Alan, the local plan's under review. We now have to look at and are creating an evidence base of what our actual needs for housing are across the city, not just a number, that different mix, and how we're going to address meeting those. So I think it's more a strategic question that we will be working on as part of the local plan.
A question from Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if you would be appalled and dismayed if,
yes, indeed.
If I were to withdraw £60,000 or £70,000 of public money from the council's bank account and then set it all on fire and burn it in Guildhall Square, because the preposterous recommendation from Councillor Vernon Jackson would effectively. No, I'm asking you if you would if you would agree with me that that would be a preposterous thing to do, because that's how much it would cost us to defend such a ridiculous Section 106 condition as to have to say that the properties must only go to Baffin's people. It would be judicially reviewed quicker than that. Do you agree with me, Chair, that it would be appalling to do that, to waste that public money?
The expenditure of public money depends upon the specific circumstances at the time and at the place. That's what you have a chairman for. Councillor Hooper.
Hello there. You've alluded to quality issues with the actual build. Can I ask specifically what those were and how they have been addressed?
Just put some images back on the screen there. So these are the houses and flats. The report details the fact that on schemes of this significance, we would take these to an independent design review panel. They express some disappointment in the design quality of the buildings for this site. Working with the applicants, there have been some minor but important design changes. I mentioned the quality of materials. Because these are fairly sort of unornamented flats and houses, I think it places greater emphasis on the importance of the quality of materials. So, a quality brick and a natural slate and the use of lead on those dormers, it is going to bring some harmony to this scheme. And that image that we've got on the top there is, in my view, going to bring some improvement to the character of the area. The site at the moment has an old boxing club, a sort of training pitch that is no longer sort of meets modern standards, a car park with a sort of changing room in the background, and a clubhouse that is just a very, very poor design. So the report offers the view that with those minor changes, the design is considered good enough.
Can I take it that the aesthetic of other buildings in the area, are they Edwardian houses?
You've got a bit
30s?
You've got a sort of range of age of properties in that locality.
Because these look rather square and fairly modern. Right, okay.
Question. Councillor Udi, then question.
Thank you. The reason for not doing affordable housing on this site, if that was the route we went down, would be because the scheme needs all the profits from the building and selling off of these things to go into the facilities. Has there been, because we haven't got that here, something to show how much profit is expected to come from the site and how that is used, and do those two things equate? And the second thing is, we have suffered in the recent past with an application that came here, again saying that they didn't want to do any affordable housing because it wouldn't be viable if they did. The numbers were accepted by the City Council, but when it went out for review by an independent and external consultant, the figures shown by the developer were, as I understand it, significantly wrong, and that the City Council was being done over by the developer. Now, I'm sure that wouldn't happen in this case, but have those figures, because we're being asked to give up affordable housing here, have those figures been checked by an independent and external consultant, and are you happy to say that the figures work?
The applicants presented evidence. Yeah. We went back them on a number of issues, and they provided further information, and that has been subject of independent review by Val Williams. Yeah. So yes, I can confirm that. But I guess the fundamentals of this is that if you were just being asked to put new housing on protected open space, we would be bringing a different recommendation to you, because it would be the loss of open space, and if it wasn't delivering on affordable housing as well, we would be saying we don't want the development. What you've got is a scheme that includes circa £3 million worth of replacement community facility, and wherever you put that cost in a balance sheet, it says there is no prospect of securing an affordable housing component. Indeed, there is a shortfall, as you will have read in the report, of around £1 million that is going to be needed in order to implement this development. It is one that, if as part of your balancing act, considering the replacement just under 3 million community facility, it cannot deliver affordable housing. But it has been rigorously checked by Val Williams.
Thanks, very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Udi, then Councillor Wood.
Hello, it's kind of two questions in one. When you say community use, does that mean that the hours that the pitch is available, does it mean that would be free to use and you don't have to pay to use it, kind of such? When it says community use.
Right. There will be a requirement as part of any permission, the recommendation includes a condition requested by Sport England, but it would be wholly appropriate in this sort of circumstance for a community use agreement. That will cover such matters as what's going to be available, so changing rooms as well as the pitch. Oh, yeah. The floodlighting so that people aren't playing with head torches or what have you. But ultimately, part of that will be a pricing structure that will be comparable with similar facilities that is available locally. But no, it won't come as free.
Okay. A follow up to that. Can we are we able to enforce or add a condition to dictate that maybe they do something small and charitable, like running a league in some of that time for people that can't afford to maybe play football?
The answer's no. I mean, ultimately, the club has a range. I think it's 10 different groups of youngsters from under 6 to under 18s.
You normally have to pay to play to these degrees, like football clubs. Like my son's 6 and he wants to go to one at Milton Cross, and that's quite an expense, really.
I guess the other alternative is playing in school teams, but yeah, there is a cost associated with that.
Councillor Wood.
I don't know any facility in Portsmouth that's free for football, hiring for any facility with any 3G pitch.
I'll have a comment to make about it, but yeah, I'll speak in
Councillor Wood.
Clearly, Chair, we're struggling a bit with the offer, which is overcoming the loss of public realm, which is the green spaces, and trading it for what facilitation is going to give the public. And I'm still struggling slightly with that. So one of the things I just want to ask, I've got two questions. Firstly, if the planning permission on the housing is tied into the overall plan, so it can't be separated out, because I guess a lot of people have seen the programme where the value of the land has increased exponentially, and that's a shareholder gift, potentially. And the second question I'll come to in a second, to do with obviously the CAMBA and the BAR, which is a similar sort of building offer that was made in the overall public good, but I want to talk about the mitigating circumstances. So question number one first.
Can I point out, Councillor Wood, that it is important that we judge each case on its particular merits, and rather than draw comparisons with other past slightly related issues. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Forgive me. Do you want to try and put that to me again?
Okay, question one. Obviously, this planning application refers to several elements, one of which is housing. And when planning is granted, if planning was granted for the housing, can that be executed separately without the rest of it being executed?
So I'm trying to go back to the phasing plan. Right. So the applicants described the fact that they're looking to develop the flats first in the first 6 months, and then for the other elements, so the clubhouse, the pitch, and the housing, to be phased 6 months later. There is intended to be a provision within the Section 106 agreement that the houses are not occupied until the club facilities are provided. And ultimately, if that worst case scenario were to happen, that the houses get built and the clubhouse doesn't, that they will be making provision for affordable housing, because we wouldn't ordinarily have been granting a planning permission for housing only. I mean, this proposal is enabling development to re-provide the sports and social club facilities. And whilst they are separate elements, they have described a mechanism for ensuring delivery, or what would happen in a scenario that they don't envisage is intended.
Okay, can I just ask, with describing previously, parking has been mitigated elsewhere in a similar sort of quid pro quo. Was that included in any previous planning?
I'm struggling to understand how that sort of links with this proposal. I mean, ultimately, if took the view that 85 spaces was over provision on that site, then obviously you could retain more protected open space by having less car parking. But as I've mentioned previously, that a pragmatic view was taken that additional provision is reasonable and appropriate for the site, because otherwise you just have people coming to that club or to use those facilities, sort of circulating around and competing for what we know to be very challenging parking conditions in that part of the city.
Right. Are there any other questions from members before we move to comment? No. In which case, let us move to comments. Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, just to comment really on Councillor Wood's last point relating to the Canberra and the Ben Ainsley development. Well, I know you didn't, but I mean that's obviously what you were getting at. I mean the land there is in the council freehold ownership, which gives the local authority much greater powers. If the council was the freehold owner of this site, then if it was the freehold owner and Moneyfields was the tenant, then Moneyfields came along with any development proposal. The council could attach whatever conditions it wanted in its role as landowner. But we're here as role of planning authority. And we don't own the site. And the council's role on planning matters does not extend to effective, almost trying to overturn private property matters. Now, I accept, and a lot of comments have been made and have implied, that in some ways this isn't the correct location for a sports ground, that there are crowded streets, that it doesn't have the best access to the road network, and I would accept that to be true. However, it has been there since 1948, and were we starting to plan Portsmouth again, were we building a new town, we wouldn't build anything like the city that we've got. I mean, it would be laid out really quite differently. But nonetheless, the football club and the sports club is located in this location, and it has the right to stay there and to operate as it is indefinitely. And from our point of view of planning authority, we need to take into account the economic and social implications of this application, for sure, and that wanting the club to survive is, I hope, something we can all agree around. Points have been made. I mean, Councillor Sanders made points about restricting the ownership of the properties, first sale of the properties, to local people. I mean, you just can't do that sort of thing. And I've moved house many times. I've moved even between wards, even between locations, even between whole cities, and I didn't need permission from the relevant local authority to do it. I just needed to strike a deal with the previous owner of the property. We can't put in restrictions like that. You cannot possibly try to fragment the housing market in that way. And yes, you know, there's some minor things about very rural areas and affordable housing. They do not apply in cities. I have never heard of an example of this in an urban area. I'd certainly be interested if there are any. I suspect I've never heard of it because it's never been done before, because it cannot be done. In terms of parking, you know, obviously there is a parking problem in the area. However, we cannot use our rights as planning authority to out-trump someone else's property rights. As has been said by the officers, the council have asked the landowners whether they would consider that, and you know, further requests can be made, but we cannot, as a planning authority, attempt to impose this sort of thing. Here we have a scheme which is proposing putting in millions of investment into community facilities in the way that this council cannot afford to do itself. We are in a position whereby, you know, with the overspends going on and children's services, with the shutdown costs of the energy company and so on, the council's reserves are likely to diminish quite significantly this year. There's not going to be pots of money available for nice things, but happily, here we have a situation where we can have something which will help football players, boxers, many others, and it won't cost the council a penny. All we have to do is get out of the way. So far as affordable housing is concerned, I do think there's a measure of crocodile tears on this, I have to say, from some of the parties here, because we have had applications in the recent past which have been for entirely affordable housing and which have been opposed. So, you know, here we have, this is a very clear-cut thing. I mean, is it possible to provide affordable housing in this scheme and make the scheme economic? No. I mean, it says in this report that there's £1 million gap even after the housing has been provided for. And of course, you know, we're trying to assess this just as a regular planning application, if an expectation of profit on top. So I don't think that's a sensible thing. I think this is an excellent scheme with considerable benefits. I'm happy to propose the report.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon-Jackson, Councillor Jones, Councillor Oudey, Councillor Smythe. You want to speak later? Yeah. Right. In which case it's Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking people that have come along to make their deputations today, in particular members of the public. I mean, some people have got a vested interest, and I appreciate that you're here, but people who have read the reports, gone through this, are living through it, it's not an easy thing, and I fully appreciate that. And actually, for me, when you have an application that's in the middle of a very densely populated area, such as Baffins is, and with the parking issues that I know are very, very evident there, I do think it's right and proper that we sort of put sufficient weight on the comments from members of the public. I'm going to start with those. So, you know, comments were made about, is there even a need for more housing in the area? Well, maybe, you know, I appreciate Baffins is quite well packed in. Those roads are long, narrow, terraced houses, particularly roads like Dover Road leading down to this particular site. But actually, we can't look at individual pockets, and we have to look at the city as a whole as a planning authority. And is there a need for more housing in Portsmouth? Yes, there is. Is it at the level the government think it is? Well, I probably wouldn't agree with the government's expectation of housing in Portsmouth over the next 20 years, but there is a need for more housing. So from that perspective, you know, I don't think we could put forward a refusal on that basis. How many people use the site? You know, I understand that I'm sure there are big variances between, you know, there being 200 or, you know, over 1,000 on some days, and depending what the event is. And actually, I think if this is done properly, and there is an element of trust here between us as a planning authority and the applicant, in that if this is developed to be a proper, you know, community sports facility with not just Weight Watchers and football, but also the boxing club, the gym, brownies, guides, whatever it might be, then actually the footfall is likely to increase at that site. So that will have an impact on local people as well. But then that brings us on to parking, which I shall come back to. Whether or not this is run as a business, and whether or not the houses will become buy-to-lets and be bought by landlords, from my perspective, I mean, I'd love them to be owned by local people, because, you know, you know, every man wants to own their own castle or in kingdom apparently. But whether or not they are owned by landlords or they are owned by people as private individuals is not a material planning consideration for us. As long as people are living in them, that for me is the key thing. We talked about the shareholders, and there was a mention about whether or not the shareholders are going to get a windfall payment. Again, whether or not that, I mean, Councillor Stubbs has highlighted a £1 million gap, so it sounds like it's unlikely. But again, sadly, if that is true, it's not a material planning consideration for us today. We also had comments about the impact on the highway and the fact that there will be 35 parking spaces lost, and also the concerns around lorries turning. And actually, the highways engineer in page 8 of the report states the absolute opposite of that and contradicts those points entirely, and says that there will be no loss of parking and that refuse lorries will be able to turn into and out of the site. And I quote that verbatim. Mr. Robb made comments around noise pollution, and actually this is probably one of the bigger sticking points for me, because I have to confess I haven't read the noise pollution survey that has come in. But what I would like to say to any members of the public that are concerned about that is that if that 2-metre high acoustic sound barrier, that acoustic fence, doesn't work properly, we have Richard Lee sat in the room. He is the officer who has responsibility for anything to do with public health and in particular noise pollution. And there are things as a local authority that we can do, working with the landlord, you know, the football club, Moneyfields Football Club, as the landowner. There are things we can do going forward if the impact to those homes ends up being substantial, because of course that's not what any of us want, and we want there to be a synergy between the two, which means that people can live happily together. So the noise impact assessment has been done. Mr. Robb has come back and said that there are omissions in it, there are gaps in it. So I think it would then be, if this is passed today, down to Richard and his team to keep an eye on that and working with local residents if there are subsequent issues picked up in the future. In terms of talking about the community football, and this is one of the oldest community football teams in football clubs in the city. I think there are many people who love football and really enjoy football, and but we've got so many community football teams across Portsmouth, but actually many of them don't have their own home. They do have to use other public spaces around the city, such as the Mountbatten Centre, Alexandra Park. I know that there's a team that now plays there in Saturday and Sunday League. And sometimes the public pitches are not of the best quality, such as at King George V. And actually, Councillor Vernon Jackson did make reference to Baffin's Milton Rovers, and that's a really good use of public open space being re-provided for a community football club, and actually they've done very well in trying to make that a going viable concern. And I assume, reading this, and if you take it as on face value, what the Moneyfields Football Club are trying to do is to create a long-lasting, sustainable community football club that ends up being a community facility with sports provision within it as well. All-weather pitches in this city are like gold dust. They're like hen's eggs. You know, we have got some, but they are used to their maximum because so many sports clubs, hockey, football, whatever it might be, they are hampered by poor quality grass pitches around the city that are often waterlogged, such as at Alexandra Park. So actually where you do have all-weather pitches, and I take Temeraire for example, which is not just used by the armed forces, by the Navy, it is also used by other clubs who can rent out the space, and you try and rent space there to play football, rugby, hockey, whatever. You cannot get space there if you're not already a regular booker, because they are, chocker. I think there are health benefits here, and really now I'm going to come on to the biggest conundrum today, and that is PCS 13 and the loss of open space. And, this isn't the easiest of applications, because as members of the City Council and members of the Planning Committee, we do live in the most densely populated city outside of London. We don't have a lot of open space, and where we do have open space, we do need to protect it. And whether it's right or wrong, part of my thought process has been, okay, let's go to the other scenario here, that planning isn't granted. What then happens to the football club if it does close down? And we do believe what we've read in the paper about it being in financial difficulties. What will happen to that land then? Who's going to care for it? Who will maintain it? Will it become a hub of crime? Will it be somewhere that youths will hang out and not very nice things will happen for local residents nearby? Now, you've got to factor everything in when you're talking about giving a planning consent or not that does involve the loss of open space. The reason that the MPPF and our local plan have that caveat around, it's a red line, there should not be any loss of public open space unless, and it's that unless policy that really we've had to focus on today, as Councillor Wood also, spoke about before. It's about considering, if you are having a loss of public open space, is the benefit that's coming good enough to outweigh the loss of the public open space? And that's kind of where a lot of my thought process has been around today. Parking, I mean, it's undeniable. I've only ever been to one football match at Moneyfields, and it was a pre-season friendly leading up to the beginning of this football season. And okay, Pompey were playing there, so of course you're going to get a lot more people going there than normal. But I tell you, I feel for the residents that lived in those roads around there, because I bet you they couldn't park because the car park was chocker, and so were all the roads leading up to it. So actually, going from 30 to 85 spaces is an increase. My maths is not great, but about 180% increase in parking spaces. If this had come back being only 30 parking spaces, I would have been very, very concerned with the increase in anticipated use of the site. But we are looking at many more parking spaces. Then we move on to the quality of what's being proposed and the design, and in particular the usage. Yes, the apartments, I'm sure, get snapped up. What I quite like, I mean, whether or not they're a bit square, a bit boxy, the actual design of the houses, I take on board the points made by Alan, and I'm sure that he's worked with the applicant and the planning agent on the modifications to the design. But in principle, what I like about the houses is the fact that they're 4-bedroom. There are some 4-bedroom homes there, because in Portsmouth we've got lots of 2- and 3-bed homes, and we are struggling for more 4-bed homes. And a lot of developers do squash in 2- and 3-bed houses, because you can get more in if you don't make them as big or you don't make them as tall. And actually, from a developer perspective, building 4-bedroom homes at that height is not necessarily about cramming in the most profit, but actually we really need 4-bedroom houses in Portsmouth, and I'm really pleased that that's come forward. Affordable housing, you know, Councillor Vernon Jackson's made some good points. It is a difficult one when it technically is triggered, but then it's not deliverable. We do get cases, as Councillor Vernon Jackson has said, where we think, is this developer having a fast one over the council? Actually, with this, I think you can see from the new proposed development that you can see where the profits are going to go. It's in that new clubhouse and the 4G pitch and the new pitch. So on balance, is this a community benefit? I think, yes, it is. And I don't know if you formally proposed it or not, did you? Then I'm happy to second that.
Councillor Smythe, then Councillor Udi, and
Thank
then
you,
Councillor
Chairman.
Vernon Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm genuinely disappointed with this application. I'm very satisfied with what we've been told by the professional advisors about what we can and can't put conditions on. But I'm surprised that your advisors haven't advised you to offer more to the community in the process of this application. And there are lots of ways that could have been done. I've already mentioned the parking deal with the local community, which could be controlled nowadays with electronic gates, and people could be billed for overstaying and that kind of thing. But I'm also particularly disappointed that it appears that you haven't looked at alternative routes for providing social housing. In the old days, when I was development officer for 2 housing associations, you were exactly the sort of organisation that would have come direct to the housing association and said, look, we're not housing developers, we don't want risk. We don't want the uncertainty of knowing whether the building is going to be difficult to do and there's going to be extra costs. We'd like to reduce the fees that we're paying, and therefore going to a registered social landlord and saying, would you like this site, and can we make the amount on the deal that we need to develop the land. There are lots of things that you could have done in your application that would have really genuinely demonstrated to me that there was a community value in here that was worth sacrificing the open space. I'd like to propose that we refer this so that the applicant can have a bit more time to think through what the right balance of community gain against the loss of the land is for us, the council. I'm not against the principle, but I think that would satisfy some of the objections we've received and give us the reassurance that sacrificing the open space, the PCS 13, is backed by really good community gains.
Right, so you have proposed a deferral
I have.
on those grounds.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Udi?
Can I hear what Councillor Vernon Jackson wants to say first, please? Thank you.
Such courtesy around the place today. Councillor Vernon Jackson, would you be wishing to speak at this moment?
Yes.
Thank you.
If I can make the blasted machine work. Thank you. And I think this is a very difficult application. So yesterday I was chairing a conference at Wembley about community use of football facilities. And in many ways this application fulfills lots of those things of their aspirations around the country. I think if we look at it step by step by step, there are reasons to be hopeful that some of the objections raised when the planning application was turned down 10 years ago have been addressed. So if there are no Brent geese, there used to be Brent geese, they've all been driven off, okay, the Brent geese have gone. The issue around affordable housing looks as if there is a sum that looks as if it is difficult to procure, and what we're being asked here to do here is on an exception site not only allow house building but allow house building and saying no affordable housing. So we're being asked to break 2 of our policies to do that because of the community use. I think there are good bits of this because if you look at the usage you're going to get out of an artificial pitch, if you're expecting it to be used 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 300 and whatever days a year, 356 days a year, that's a really intensive use of that space. So a lot more people will be able to use it. And so I think you've addressed a lot of the concerns, the planning issues that were around 10 years ago. Although I think for me, and I pick up what Donna has said, or Councillor Jones has said, and I think the reason I can't use my mic, Councillor Jones, is you've left yours on.
Oh, sorry.
Is the issue of trust, and I think there are some questions here. That there's been a request to think about how it would be possible to find a way of the local community being able to use, as you say they currently do, some of the parking on site to be able to reduce some of the pressures around. I think there is, looking at the phasing, the phasing says, as I understand it, that the block of flats is built first. Is that right? And that what could happen, and this again is an issue of trust, is that block of flats is built out, profits are made, and then none of the rest of the development then happens. No, so this is about trust and enabling development. So when we've talked in the past, particularly with PFC, we were absolutely clear that you had to make sure that any money that was produced could only go onto the redevelopment and was in an escrow account, so could never be used for anything else. So I think there are some issues here, and they are issues, as far as I can see, we probably can't insist on. But whether the Moneyfields would voluntarily give the council the reassurance on the local community, the reassurance on some of these things, to address some of the concerns that have been raised, I think is worth exploring more. So I think I would support, and we can't insist upon it. The planning officer has been absolutely right. So on the whole, I think this is a good scheme, but I think it could be made into a better scheme. And therefore, I think I would like to support the idea of asking for a deferral to allow the club, the council and local residents to see if some of those areas could be put in at the voluntary gift of Moneyfields Club. We've been very successful in Portsmouth about getting new homes, both for Milton Meon, but also for the Baffins football teams, and it'd be great if we can continue that. I just think there are some areas here that have come out today where improvements could be made, reassurance could be given to the community, and therefore trust could be re-established where it appears some of that has gone. And therefore I think I would support the idea of deferral to allow that negotiation to go on, and then it to come back to this committee and to be able to say to this committee, yes, those things have been resolved, or no, they haven't, and then for us to be able to make a decision. So I'd formally like to second the idea of deferral so those issues can be looked at.
Councillor Uli.
So yeah, thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson, for that. For me, when I read that it said community use, as you know, I've only been here a few months, so when I read it's community use in my mind, I thought, oh, they're going to like rent it out for free or something. So I was just like, this is lovely. This is what's mitigating the Section 106, basically, which is the fourth one in the fifth planning committee I've been to. So 80% of planning committee, someone's trying to check in a Section 106 to get out affordable housing. And basically that really, really winds me up. When you're trying to avoid the housing. So basically you are here to make profit and at the same time as building community community area, and I have to decide in my heart and in my head whether I trust everything that's happening right now. And Councillor Vernon Jackson's put it quite well, and I think I'm in for deferral because I want to know more things about what the community use would entail. Like when you say the words grassroots, to me as a campaigner, grassroots means from the bottom and people coming together. And there are a lot of people that might be in this city that can't afford to play football. They just play in a mugger, a multi-use games area every day, and that's all they do, when really they need the encouragement to come up. And I think there could be more to explore on a community basis as as Moneyfields to maybe come forward and support those in deprived areas. So I think we can look into that on the deferral as well, and I'll support Councillor Smythe. Thanks.
Councillor Stubbs, then Councillor Wood.
I just want to clarify what material planning grounds this deferral is proposed on, because Councillor Vernon Jackson has more or less admitted, he says basically there are no valid planning concerns for his deferral, but he wants to do a deferral anyway, which is quite an interesting situation, because I don't think you can do that.
I think what I'm asking for is some space to be able to explore with the developer whether voluntarily they will enter into any of these agreements that have been suggested, both in terms of maybe how affordable housing might happen, but so it is to allow time for that discussion to take place. And I'm not saying that we should, if they say no, that I would then say vote for it for not to get planning permission. I just want to see if it's possible to have a discussion to make sure that whatever comes back to us is a better scheme.
Okay, but I have to say, I mean, this planning application has been in since January, so there's been plenty of time to have discussions outside of the planning process, which is what you seem to be talking about. You could have done that already.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Taking up the point, for me, this was very much about what benefits would happen to the wider public in response to giving up the green space, etc. And looking at the list that Alan Banting pointed out to us, which was the offer, if I was putting a good business case together for saving Moneyfields, etc., for the shareholders but it wouldn't look much different to this. So my differential is what is in it for, up and above for the local community, because it will impact them, the local people, it will definitely impact them. And I think I was thinking about refusing, but I'll probably go for a deferral, because for me this is about making sure that offer that's in this report is an offer that balances that out, which is the major decision that we're making, which is the offer good enough? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones, before we put these various bits to the vote.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm just wanting to get my head around, I've now got two options. There's either, there's three actually. Vote for, vote against, as I've seconded the proposal to vote for. I have discounted the voting against on the balance of, yes, trust, I get that, about the community usage, or deferral, because the deferrals come in after I spoke. So I just have three questions, if I can, please, of the planning officer. First of all, before Councillor Stubbs mentioned the time, I wrote down time limit on the application. Are we already out of time on this as an authority to determine? And if we're not, if this is deferred, at what point do we make ourselves vulnerable as a planning authority to an appeal based on non-determination in the set time limits? That's question one.
It's outside of the 13 weeks and it could be appealed for non-determination.
Okay, so we are already vulnerable on that one. My next question was, is the applicant then able to appeal today if we have the deferral? The answer to that is yes, on the non-determination rule. So my next question then, and I'm not sure if Alan will know this or if it might have to be Claire or will be a bit of a guess. It's a financial question, so I doubt, Kieran, you might know actually. If this went through an appeal, what cost would the council be fined by the planning inspectorate?
The cost implication is if the applicant submitted a cost application. So in terms of, they would have to demonstrate unreasonable behaviour by the council, and the fact that as a planning committee you're tasked to make a decision and that a decision wasn't made and why that decision wasn't made. So it would be the minute of the behaviour this afternoon as you as a committee that would then be examined to see whether or not you had been reasonable in your behaviour. And the case that they would make to the inspectorate is that, in their view, it was an unnecessary appeal and seek to award the cost of them running that appeal. So it'd be the cost of professional fees, turning up at a hearing or an inquiry or writing written reps.
In which case, thank you for the information. I have another question arising from that, and that is it possible, well, I know it is, but okay, can I get your opinion on, because I take on board the points that Councillor Smythe and Councillor Vernon-Jackson have made about trying, you know, Councillor Vernon-Jackson said on merits of this he's happy with it, but just if we can get some give back to the local community to compensate them, which I see. Can we add that in rather than a deferral today, which puts the council in a very vulnerable position and may mean then that we lose all ability to set any of the Section 106 criteria because the planning inspector will effectively do that and not us as the local planning. It's taken out of our hands completely then. Can we, to address Councillor Vernon-Jackson and Councillor Smythe's concerns, add an additional condition? We've got 3 recommendations here, okay? Could we add in an additional condition that empowers Alan and Claire, whoever, but Alan, to work with the applicants to ensure that there is an enhanced community benefit on top of what is there at the moment. So, for example, you know, we've heard from the chairman that they do already allow local people to park there. I know we can't compel that. I know that's not legally compelling for the long term because it's private land. However, could there be some statement made by the club to Alan that has to be, you know, that's just an indication from them of what they will do to help the local community, that then could be delegated to Alan to work with the club on that basis? Because my concern with a deferral today is that we are therefore then losing control should the applicant go to appeal straight away. So that would be my proposal, to try and get this sorted out and to protect the council's position long term.
The Assistant Director of Culture and City Development.
So just to talk that through as an option, then as a committee, I'm already seeking from you delegated authority to complete a legal agreement. So you could choose as a committee that you wanted to further delegate that authority to actually negotiate whatever it is I could negotiate as a community benefit. And you could choose to do that delegated authority in consultation with the chair. However, in delegating that authority, you are giving me that authority to carry out that negotiation, and you would have to trust that outcome or that judgment that would be made by me, because you're taking the decision making for whether the offer is good enough away from yourselves and giving it to me or in consultation.
Our decision is our decision. Councillor Smythe, Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit one of the avenues that I said in my earlier comment should be pursued. I imagine, and this isn't a planning matter, I'm quite aware, that to comment that Moneyfields need certainty about what the deficit is that they need then to apply for other grants and other things to fill. And I think that the risk of the existing condition about phasing is quite great for them. And I think given the extra money from the government for housing, there will be more RSL and local authority money, which could make the whole of this development affordable housing, not in a Section 106 sense, but just simply because that's what the applicant was. So that's one of the reasons why I think a deferral is important. I think it could be worked out better for all parties and the community.
Thank you. And my understanding from the response from Alan Banting is that this application is already past its time. So the applicants could already have appealed yesterday or today for non-determination. So we're in no different position today than if we asked for a deferral for one meeting. So there is no legal difference, as I understand that. I've not heard anybody at this table propose that this application should be refused. What we're talking about here is whether there is a route for some negotiation to be able to try to make sure that it is an application that maybe potentially could be improved. So I don't see there's any difference in terms of the appeal route. I think Councillor Jones and Councillor Stubbs were very persuasive earlier in the meeting saying that some of the concerns that came from residents could not be imposed on the landowner by condition. So what I'm trying to do is a different route, and because, as Councillor Stubbs said, this is private land and we can't fetter that. So what I'm trying to do is to find a different route for some negotiation to be able to see if we can find a conclusion that works for everybody's interests. Now, that might not work. And it might be that in one meeting's time we're back in exactly the same position and nothing has changed. But at least we've made an effort to try to find ways of resolving some of these areas of conflict, and trying to make sure that the trust in what the club wants to do is established. So I'm very keen that we look at a deferral, but I think I would be very keen to make sure it is written that it is a deferral for one meeting and one meeting only. Because I think the club have to have a sense of time when they will get an absolute clear decision. And I think there has been nobody down this table, as far as I've heard today, who has argued for a refusal. This is about trying to make sure that we work to try to get the best possible outcome and address the maximum concerns of local residents. So I am persuaded by Councillor Stubbs that we can't do this through just giving it to Claire and said to get as a condition. I think he was persuasive in that, and therefore I think the route suggested by Councillor Jones doesn't work, and therefore I think the more informal route is one that I think works better. But the club need and deserve a time limit. So I think it is important that if there is a deferral, it is for one meeting and one meeting only.
I'm going to take Councillor Jones, and then I think it is time that we move to a decision. And so, Councillor Jones, you have the last word before we make a decision.
There are questions actually arising, so I've made my comments already. The question is that I wonder if the Assistant Head of City Development Planning could tell us whether or not the proposal put forward by Councillor Smythe in terms of a deferral on the basis of potential funds that may come in from the government on community housing is actually permitted. I think that would be illegal for us to do a deferral on that basis. So can we check that? And secondly, Councillor Jackson, he agreed with what Councillor Smythe said. I was just trying to get my head around where I am on this at the moment. Is Councillor Vernon Jackson saying that he seconds the deferral on that basis or on a different basis? And also, without wanting to put words in Councillor Stubbs' mouth, he doesn't have a massive objection to my proposal of enhancing a community benefit statement delegated. He had an issue with the points made for things like local housing to be sold only to Bethlenem's residents and things like that.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I put forward a this sounds suspicious like what I said 2 hours ago. My suggestion was actually to have all these discussions as part of the legal agreement, which enables a specific time limit, because there is a specific time limit within the legal agreement of 3 months. It will provide certainty and will not open the council up to any problems with appeals and stuff like that. Thank you. Just an alternative.
If I can just advise the council on the point around affordable housing, just to manage expectations, if there is a deferral this meeting, then the scheme that's been put to us uses the money that might have normally been used for affordable housing to provide a community facility. So the offer of affordable housing is taken off the table. If a permission is granted, it is open to the applicants to use that permission in the way that some other applicants have done in the history of the city, and work with a registered provider to provide an affordable offer. We're not stopping that happening if a planning permission is granted. But what we couldn't do is say that that would happen, because the finances and the structure isn't there.
So, Chair, I think I've been very clear that what we're trying to do is to deferral to allow some more discussion with the applicants to be able to to provide some reassurance to local residents and see if we can provide a better scheme. So I don't think it's time tied to
it is clear,
ourselves.
Councillor Vernon Jackson, that what you were seconding was that this should be deferred for fuller consideration of the mitigation for the loss of the loss of protected open space and for the non-provision of affordable housing.
but for one meeting and one meeting only.
Right. So that is the proposal, Councillor Smythe.
Councillor Mason, we need to make sure that the wording includes about community benefit and community provision. So in a wide thing, to be able to have a wide discussion with the club and not to fetter that too much. And it may get nowhere.
Do you think we can do that? Yes. Yes, okay. But it's basically consideration of the mitigation. Yeah. Yes, we think that that is possible, Councillor Vernon-Jackson. I now intend to move to the vote. The first vote, proposed by Councillor Stubbs and Councillor Donna Jones, seconded by Councillor Donna Jones, is that we accept the officer's recommendation. May I see all in favour of accepting the officer's recommendation, please? 4. Can I see those against the officer's recommendation? And there was 1, 2, 3, 4. I think, therefore, that it is a question of keeping the matter open. I therefore move to the second proposal, which would come from Councillor Vernon-Jackson. Sorry, Councillor Smythe, seconded by Councillor Vernon-Jackson, that we should defer for one meeting and one meeting only for consideration of the additional social provision, and a fuller consideration of mitigation. That has been proposed. Can I see those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 3. That is carried. The item is therefore deferred for until our next meeting for consideration of the mitigation and of the social provision which is being recommended for mitigation. Correct? That, I think, concludes that piece of this afternoon's entertainment. Thank you. Yes, I would like to thank the deputies for their deputations and for the courtesy which they have shown to the chair in making their deputations. If I can be heard over the general melee. There will now be a 10-minute break. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to recommence. The second item on the agenda today is 36 Campbell Road, which has come up to us a number of times before. Conversion of two 6-person HMOs to form one 9-person HMO. There was an objector who wished to make a deputation today but found that she could not. So we have here Mr. Mike West and Mr. Jonathan McDermott, the applicant and the agent, and I'd be grateful if they'd come to the table. May I have the officer's presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The application relates to number 36 Campbell Road, which is a mid-terrace property with 4 floors of accommodation, located close to its intersection with Wilson Grove and Lawrence Road to the east. The proposal seeks the conversion of the property to form a 9-bedroom HMO. The above slide indicates the HMO count data. The application site is located there with the red dot. A previous application at the site was appealed and dismissed, partly on the understanding that the HMO count in the area was in excess of 10%. Further to communications from interested parties regarding the validity of this data, the Plan and Enforcement team have undertaken extensive monitoring exercises to establish the true accuracy of the data. Page 51 of the committee report outlines those findings. This slide is just to try and quantify the outcome of those investigations. The property in green here is the application site, number 36 Campbell Road. Properties highlighted in blue are those that have been included on the list of HMOs, but further to investigations are considered to be C3 residential dwellings on the balance of probabilities, either in use as single dwellings or as a series of flats. Properties highlighted in red, including some in Campbell Mansions, are also are considered to actually be lawful HMOs. So, of the 56 residential properties within the radius, 3 are considered to be in HMO use with an existing density of 5.36%. If planning permission is granted, the HMO count would rise to 7.14% and is therefore considered to be acceptable in principle. The City Council records have been amended to reflect the outcome of these investigations. The above slides show the front and rear elevations of the property. There's a front forecourt that's currently used for bin and bicycle storage, and a larger garden to the rear that has some external seating and further storage. The proposed floor plans that are in front of you indicates that the property is spread out over 4 floors. The property has been granted a HMO licence for 9 individuals until June 2023. There are a total of 9 bedrooms in the property, 2 shared shower rooms and 5 en-suites. All of the proposed bedrooms meet the minimum size standards, and 8 of the 9 bedrooms are in excess of 10 metres squared. These images just show the layout of the communal living space located at ground floor. The space is slightly undersized by approximately 2.9 metres squared. However, this is considered to be acceptable on the basis that the majority of the bedrooms are over 10 metres squared. The property provides adequate facilities for the storage and preparation of food, as well as seated areas and access to external amenity space. These images just highlight some of the bedrooms in the property. Again, they're all in excess of the minimum size standards and have adequate light, ventilation and outlook. The property has 2 shared shower rooms and 5 en-suites, as mentioned, each containing a WC basin and shower unit. And this slide just demonstrates the additional amenities provided in the property, including bin and bicycle storage to the front of the property, internal and external seating, and also laundry facilities as well. On the basis of the outcome of recent appeal decisions and on the basis that there is a provision of a suitable standard of living accommodation, the recommendation is for conditional permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDermott and Mr. West.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. It's been a long one. Lovely to see you again. Right, I'm just going to focus on policy. and then I'll hand over to my client, Mr. West, who's going to talk to you about some of the qualitative aspects of this. Now, members will remember this was before you as a non-determination matter a little while ago, based on a result from the HMO count. Now, following the appeal, we took some time to go through that HMO count in detail, identifying that, amongst others, you had one-bedroom flats on that HMO count. You had two-bedroom flats that were being used by two people, so not an HMO, and that the property next door, which weirdly was an HMO, was actually being occupied by a family home. Interestingly enough, that occupier is the objector, who was due to be here today. So that's her family home. So we identified there were some errors with the count. That's commonplace when trying to assemble a lot of different data sets together to create an overall picture. When we identified those errors, we highlighted that to the council. The council did its due diligence very, very thoroughly, door knocking. From memory, Niall will assist me, pretty much every property that had been identified to identify exactly where and what the usage was, and the findings in your report. The outcome of that is this. The decision making made by the inspector was based on a figure. That figure has been proven to be incorrect. The figure as presented to you is the correct figure. That is, if you allow planning permission for this HMO to persist, there will be less than 10% of HMOs within the street. That's in accordance with your policy. The other part of the policy is on the space standards. Now, we've demonstrated, and Niall has reiterated, that this property actually has some of the most generous space standards that I've ever seen in any of the HMOs that I've presented before this committee, or any that we presented as a company. And as you may know, we do present a few. The reality is you're dealing with a very high quality HMO here, and my client will talk a little bit on that in a moment. But the minor deficiencies in terms of the shared amenity area are more than made up by the fact that you've got bedrooms in there where, just reading off the slide that Niall was very helpfully put up, 18 square metres, 14 square metres, 17 square metres, 20 square metres in size. In fact, there's only one or two that actually dip below that. So the reality is you've got a very high quality HMO, and the answer, I think, to the question of this application is, in policy terms, does it comply? Yes. Is it the kind of HMO the City Council wants to promote? Yes. I now turn to my client, Mike West, who will just talk to you about the development of this property.
Chairman, councillors, committee members. In August 2014, my son Chris and I attended a free presentation at the Holiday Inn in Pembroke Road. It was the start of our 3-year, £25,000 investment in property education. Chris is with me here. We wanted to learn how to be really good landlords so that we could offer excellent, safe accommodation while also providing for 3 generations of the West family. 17 months ago, we purchased 36 Campbell Road. Although double licensed, it had 2 C4s and 2 licenses, well, 3 licenses actually, one for the stairway. The property was in very poor condition indeed. The bathrooms were disgusting, and parts of the property were in a dangerous condition. Top floor walls were leaning out by more than 4 inches. Properties in this condition often attract problematic tenants. There have been allegations of fights in the road, drug dealing, and police being called in the early hours. We had to make a choice. Do we get it up and running quickly, cash flow benefits obviously, or do we do an 8-month refurbishment costing more than £100,000 in order to attract a higher quality tenant? We chose the latter. First of all, we had to make the property safe. This required a lot of steel beams, and your pictures will speak to this. Steel beams and sections of wall had to be rebuilt where they were bowing out so dangerously. Then we concentrated on the interior. 7 new bathrooms, 5 of them en suite. A high-pressure water system so that all of the showers could be used at the same time. We all know what Portsmouth water pressure is like. 2 300-litre hot water tanks, so there's always plenty of hot water for the tenants. A new heating system with web-based controls. Virgin Vivid 200 megabit fibre broadband, installation of a commercial quality Wi-Fi system to provide coverage on all 4 floors, and triple glazing for energy efficiency and comfort. Outside, we've rebuilt the front porch, including renovation of the original stained glass, provided an amenity area with chairs, tables and parasols, built a new brick wall at the front made from handmade bricks with weatherstruck pointing to match the exact colour of the original. It's actually been commended by the Portsmouth Society. And we've repointed the outside walls, again weatherstruck on the front, and replaced all of the wall ties. The energy performance certificate was originally an F. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, that's unlettable today. It's now a C, which I think is a testimony to the changes that we've made. To get a C on a Victorian property is really quite challenging. And of course, it's much more comfortable for tenants as a consequence of that. We have a strong commitment to our management plan. A testimonial from a neighbour of another property demonstrates this, and that's in your pack. That's for a North End Avenue property. The property was beset with similar issues to those here. Again, the landlords have been insufficiently attentive, yet we achieved a successful turnaround, just as we've done with 36 Campbell Road. Chris and I manage the house ourselves and personally interview prospective tenants. No agents are involved. We use an app for management and communication. Tenants love this. We have dramatically changed the tenant profile with an average age of 30.6 years and occupations including nursing, management and lecturing. Lynn is our cleaner and a family friend. She attends the communal areas fortnightly and is our eyes and ears. We're very proud of the high quality standard of living which we provide and have a simple ethos. If we would not be happy for a family member to live in the house, we will change it. Now, can I also just quickly take you through the photographs? The first set of photographs, then, if you've got a weak stomach, they're not really for you. That's the way the property was. How people can live in that's beyond me. And then you get a sense from the second page of photographs of the extent to which we worked in areas in the basement, areas on the top floor where we put a lot of steelwork in to make it safe, walls knocked out, and so on. And then finally, you've got pictures which are very similar to Niall's pictures earlier on, which show what the property looks like now. We've got 3 references from tenants. Now, these are all written by the tenants. They're unprompted. That's two-sided. And then finally, there's the reference I talked about of a neighbour of a property we have in North End Avenue, where we've achieved a successful turnaround there. So I hope, I don't want to bore you, with too much written documentation, but I do want to try and convey our commitment to the management of the properties. And we're not just giving you a spiel about it, we're actually demonstrating that we have experience and we've done this. And I think an awful lot of that is down to our personal commitment and the professional training that we've undertaken. Chairman, committee members, councillors, thank you.
Members, questions? Right. 2 questions from the chair. One about the communal space, which is undersized. I would like to know how that has been planned so that there is no deleterious effect to it being undersized. And my second question is on the number of people who will be occupying the house. One notices from the picture on the back page that at least one of the beds is a double bed, and so how do we ensure it's a 9-person or 9-bed HMO?
On the question of occupation, we have a condition you will see on page 56 that limits the occupation of the property to 9 unrelated individuals. Having speaking with the applicant, it seems that that is his intention anyway. If the property is over-occupied at any one time, it then becomes an enforcement issue, and we would take necessary enforcement action at that stage. In regards to the communal living space, yes, it is slightly undersized by 3 square metres. Speaking with colleagues in licensing, they believe that if bedrooms are over 10 metres squared, you can consider a reduction in communal living space. As mentioned in my presentation, a licence has already been granted for the property until 2023. That will be followed up by verification visits, I believe, and if there are any issues in terms of the usability of the property as a HMO, the licensing department will address that specifically with the owner of the property.
Councillor Udi, then Councillor Jones.
Just 2 points. That picture of the toilet, you could have just flushed it before you took a photo. It just makes me laugh, and I don't know why. It's just there is toilet roll in there. Or maybe just added it for dramatic effect, I don't know. I'm going to say the kitchen does look really small for 9 people, blimey. But at the end of the day, it's under 10%. I move to recommend the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. A very straightforward application. Happy to second Councillor Udi's proposal. 12 beds down to 9 beds. You could have clearly had far more bedrooms here. You haven't. You have substantially improved one of our beautiful old buildings in the city, which obviously was particularly unloved. And what it looks like what you have done is a substantial improvement. You haven't shoehorned bedrooms in. You've done it sympathetically with good space standards for the bedrooms. And yeah, I mean, you know, the data and the reason for the refusal previously, hopefully, will be abrogated going forward when we do have that HMO database up and running, which is something that I agreed to do when I was the Cabinet Member for Planning Regeneration. So looking forward to the database being live. And thank you very much. I think what you've done is great.
Councillor Hooper.
Yes, I'd just like to forward echo what Councillor Jones has said. Yeah, I think you should be highly commended. I think you've clearly improved an old property and are offering a quality provision to local single renters, many of whom may be essential workers. So I think that's commendable.
Right. No one else? Put it to the vote. Those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. You have your planning permission. And when you go back to North End Avenue, please give my regards to Horatio Gooden, whom I remember from about 10 years ago, but life of me, I can't remember why I was dealing with him. Yeah. Thank you very much, members. I think that concludes this afternoon's entertainment.